Christopher Nolan is well known for his intense attention to detail, working on and researching his projects for years before they're finally ready to go before cameras. His 2023 blockbuster Oppenheimer is no different.
The important thing isn't can you read music, it's can you hear it. Can you hear the music, Robert?
Yes, I can.
In fact, it may be his most meticulously constructed movie to date. Using the biography, American Prometheus, as his template, Nolan clearly went to great lengths to depict a crucial handful of years in the complicated life of J. Robert Oppenheimer, whom Nolan has said is the most important human who ever lived, for better or worse. If you've seen the film, and based upon its incredible $900 million worldwide box office haul, you probably have, you might have wondered just how close to reality Nolan's film truly is. Well, you can stop wondering, because we're about to give you a quick history lesson and tell you what really happened to Oppenheimer.
Why don't you have a Nobel Prize? Why aren't you a general? They're making me one for this. Perhaps I'll have the same luck. A Nobel Prize for making a bomb? Alfred Nobel invented dynamite.
To sum it all up rather quickly, it does seem as though Nolan stuck as close to the facts as he could with Oppenheimer, making it all the more incredible how cinematic and moving the picture is. Then again, if we're talking about a bomb that could potentially destroy humanity as we know it, the story is inherently pretty dramatic.
And I wanted to ask you why you came to him and why you came to that subject matter initially.
I think it's been a sort of long, slow creep towards something, which is very often the case in my life and career. You know, I first heard about Oppenheimer through, in the 80s, Sting's song, Russians. He refers to Oppenheimer's deadly toys. I actually referred to him in my previous film, Tenet, because we'd come to realize, there's this moment in the Manhattan Project where Oppenheimer and his fellow scientists couldn't completely rule out the possibility of a chain reaction that would set fire to the atmosphere before they conducted the Trinity test. And yet they went ahead and pushed that button. But ultimately, I just thought, what a dramatic moment. What an incredible thing for them to have done. And what would it be like to take the audience there? What would it be like to be there?
The movie's structure depicts two monumental periods in Robert Oppenheimer's life: his work on developing the A-bomb that eventually ended World War II, and the subsequent hearings years later that eventually stripped him of his security clearance. Said hearings were orchestrated by one-time colleague Louis Strauss, who'd long held a grudge against Oppenheimer for humiliating him on a public stage.
I'd say isotopes are less useful than electronic components, but more useful than a sandwich.
Naturally, all of this actually happened as shown, and Oppenheimer's life was never the same after losing his Q clearance. One person who persuaded the board to vote against Oppenheimer was another former colleague, Edward Teller, who claimed he had no confidence in Oppenheimer anymore, which is also based in fact. Teller seemingly held a grudge against Oppenheimer's dismissal of his pet project, the hydrogen bomb. The A-bomb was indeed tested in the New Mexico desert, the first time an atom bomb had ever been detonated. In the film, Oppenheimer recites a line from Hindu scripture, "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds."
And now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
The famous quote was taken from an interview Oppenheimer did years later, recounting what he was thinking when he saw the bomb go off.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
But it's unclear whether or not he actually said it aloud as you watch the results of his work. Most likely, Nolan thought it made for a gripping exclamation mark on an already compelling scene. After two A-bombs are dropped on Japan, Oppenheimer became an unlikely celebrity, appearing on the covers of magazines like Time and being hailed as the man who stopped the war. But his guilt over the lives lost, as depicted in the film, was very real. In one crucial scene, he meets with President Truman and relays his feelings, ultimately saying he felt like he had blood on his hands, which Truman promptly dismisses, referring to the scientist as a crybaby.
Don't let that crybaby back in here.
This all really happened as well, as Truman thought he deserved the actual credit, for lack of a better word, for dropping the bombs.
They care who dropped it. I did.
One sequence that is foggy in terms of truthfulness is when a young Oppenheimer poisons the apple of his tutor, Edward Blackett, only to regret it the next day. In American Prometheus, this event is told secondhand by an old friend of Oppenheimer's, who claims Robert told him about the aborted poisoning on a handful of occasions. However, Oppenheimer's grandson Charles claims it never happened and resented the authors for putting an unsubstantiated story in the book. While Charles could not possibly know if it really happened because he wasn't there, his point is well taken that it's just a story from the grapevine, perhaps invented out of whole cloth.
Wormhole.
Science has profoundly altered the conditions of man's life, both materially and in ways of the spirit as well. It has extended the range of questions in which man has a choice. It has extended man's freedom to make significant decisions. No one can predict what vast new continents of knowledge the future of science will discover. But we know that as long as men are free to ask what they will, free to say what they think, free to think what they must, science will never regress, and freedom itself will never be wholly lost.
Oppenheimer's personal life is more important to the film, and naturally, Nolan tells it warts and all. For starters, Oppie, which people actually did call him, was a serial womanizer who carried on affairs with secretaries and even the wives of colleagues. His first true love, Jean Tatlock, was a troubled woman who had a major effect on Oppie's flirtation with the Communist Party, which would ultimately get him in trouble with the FBI. While Robert was married to Kitty Oppenheimer, he did visit Jean and likely reignited their love affair, however briefly. Tatlock was eventually discovered drowned in a bathtub sometime later, supposedly by her own hand. And though the movie vaguely hints at it, uncertainty surrounded the nature of her death, with some believing she might have been killed by government agents. To this day, mystery still revolves around what really happened. Kitty Oppenheimer is depicted as a depressed alcoholic in the film, thanks to her loneliness and erratic relationship with her husband. In fact, Kitty was given bouts of heavy drinking and felt stymied after being relegated to the role of housewife in Los Alamos. In her former life, she was a biologist and a botanist, but those skills weren't put to use during her time in New Mexico, leading to a frequently unhappy marriage. However, they stuck together until his death in 1967.
Welcome, such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
I am an enormous fan, and we're here to talk about Oppenheimer in particular.
Yeah. We imagine a future. And our imaginings horrify us.
I have 1,000 questions. How comfortable are you, celebrity mastermind style, in your knowledge of Oppenheimer? Because you've said that you began with sort of a Wikipedia level general. Now that you've been through the Looking Glass and gone through this incredible experience with Christopher Nolan, do you feel anything resembling an expert? Because his life is just...
Yeah, it's kind of vast. Here's the way I approach things. When Chris called me up, which was a shock out of the blue, and
you won't be wearing a mask this time.
Yeah, finally.
I promise you.
He told me, and like you said, I had a very kind of superficial, really, understanding of his life. They won't fear it. I knew about the Manhattan Project and the Trinity test. Until they understand it. Nothing really kind of before or after. I had about 6 months as well, so you just start to dive in. And they won't understand it. Okay. And there's so much text there, so I just dove in. Until they've used it. Then also I did a lot of work from the outside in on his physicality, his voice. Theory will take you only so far.
He has certain poses, doesn't he?
Yeah.
That he enjoys. He likes them both here sometimes.
Yeah. I won't let you leave.
When he's older, he sort of pushes himself out a bit more.
Yeah. You spotted them all.
Oh, I love him.
Why would we go to the middle of nowhere for who knows how long?
For a year or 2 or 3. The hand on the hip thing was a recurring image in a lot of the photographs, particularly around the Trinity test, and particularly with him and Groves. And they're such a kind of an odd couple, graphically together, that I just nicked that.
Finally, Oppenheimer did indeed enjoy a friendship with the most famous scientist of them all, Albert Einstein. Though the movie's most enthralling scene between them, when Oppenheimer reveals his worry that he's helped the eventual destruction of the world itself, was a complete work of fiction. So too is the sequence where Oppenheimer asks Einstein's advice regarding the A-bomb possibly igniting the atmosphere, killing all life on Earth. While these two respected each other and presumably talked frequently, These conversations are the work of Nolan's imagination. For a movie that gets so much about its subject right, a little exaggeration is more than acceptable.